Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the Hoosier left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. Last week, I had a fantastic conversation with state Senate candidate Katrina Owens, who is going to unseat repeat villain, incumbent Senator and Ray Skillman puppet Aaron Freeman in District 32 this November. Let's start this week by reintroducing another recurring heel in the Who's Left extended universe, Jefferson Shreve, last year's Republican nominee for mayor of Indianapolis, storage unit tycoon, and one of the wealthiest men in the state, with a net worth of over $500 million. I ranted about this guy in January while spending entirely too much time at IU Health Bloomington Hospital. Countless times, I entered and exited through the Shreve Atrium and walked past a plaque commemorating his generosity and commitment to the health and well-being of Hoosiers in South Central Indiana. And while I don't doubt the sincerity of his philanthropy, former President Teddy Roosevelt knew more than a century ago the inherently antidemocratic, paternalistic, and amateuristic nature of relying on the benevolence of plutocrats to perform what should be essential government functions, stating, quote, "No amount of charities in spending such fortunes can compensate in any way for the misconduct in acquiring them." End quote. I concluded that article thusly: if our propertied overlords were really committed to our health and well-being, they'd advocate not just for universal government-run health insurance like every other developed nation in the world, but for all of the other things that contribute to human wellness: clean air and water, affordable fresh food, well-paying jobs, quality education, safe, people-centered communities. You know, everything Republicans stand against. They'd lobby popularly elected representatives from fairly drawn districts to fund these priorities, and then get out of the way so an efficient bureaucracy, staffed by experts in their fields and subject to democratic oversight, could implement such a system in a just, equitable fashion, and they'd happily pay their fucking taxes to make it happen. Instead, they pay to put their name on things. By all accounts, Jefferson Shreve is an incredibly nice guy. To your face. But I don't think it's very nice to support policies that force thousands of Hoosiers into medical bankruptcy, flood our streets with guns, reinforce old class and race hierarchies, persecute the LGBTQ community, and let women die in hospital parking lots for lack of necessary medical care. Now, thankfully, even after spending $13.5 million of his fortune and carpet bombing central Indiana with radio, television, and podcast ads, he was defeated soundly last November. Not that the guy who beat him is doing such a bang-up job. But like herpes, Shreve just won't go away. He's back for another run at elected office in 2024, this time for Congress in Indiana's 6th district, where Greg, the lesser Pence, is retiring after this term, perhaps to spend more time hanging with his brother. So when it comes to governing, Shreve is guilty of the worst kind of simplistic thinking: that wealth equals competence in all areas, and rich men should run things. Another tired episode of Dollar Knows Best. Well, you don't have to be Einstein to observe that the last 40-plus years of the neoliberal experiment disproves the hypothesis. my guest today. His opponent was, however, awarded an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship and spent almost a year on Capitol Hill with a select group of K-12 STEM teachers helping craft national education policy. Cinde Wirth is a teacher, scientist, and entrepreneur. She's also a regular person who knows how to make a tight budget last till the end of the month and not an out-of-touch semi-billionaire with enough money lying around to buy things like, I don't know, the government. In the following interview, we will talk about all of those different roles she's played and how they've uniquely prepared her for a role in Washington as Indiana's 6th District Representative. We'll also talk about the economy, healthcare, abortion rights, immigration, Social Security and Medicare, and gun control. She'll also tell us about the mood of the people she's been speaking with and the challenges of running against a candidate with unlimited resources. Now, before we turn to that conversation, please consider supporting Who's Left with a financial contribution. There are so many more things I want to do with this project, more campaign finance research, more live events, currently planning on being live for the Vance Walls and Braun McCormick debates in early October, and a daily episode if we can get there. But to do that, I need your help. So if you can, visit scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you can help me push our state in a better direction, and maybe, if we reach critical mass, I can put down my tool belt and devote my full time to you, to this project, and to Indiana's future. This takes a lot of work, so throw me a friggin' bone. Let's get a better cam and a better mic and keep improving the overall quality. And while the best way to help this project is monetarily, if that doesn't work for your budget at this time, you can still help. Subscribe at the free level over on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Rate and review the show on whatever platform you use. This trains the algorithm to help new people find us. Follow me on social media. On Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok, the handle is Who's Left, that's HOOS Left. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, I'm at ScottRog78, that's SCOTTROG78. And on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. Please subscribe on whichever you use and send me a DM to discuss ideas for the project. But most importantly, share this with somebody who cares about Indiana. Forward the articles to friends, family, and colleagues. Don't just like, but share on social media. Invite others to our little corner of the Indiana left. And I might be the guy with the microphone, but I try to take this thing where your input leads me. So please, be generous with feedback. Good or bad, I value it all. To those who have joined this community already, especially those paid subscribers, thank you. Your investment in me is an honor, and I really try to make it worth your while. And to everybody, thanks for listening. Now here's my interview with Cinde Wirth. Cinde Wirth, thanks for joining the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers. Let them know who you are.
So I'm Cinde Wirth. I am running for Indiana's 6th Congressional District, which is 11 counties across central Indiana, from Marion County and Johnson County in the center of the state, all the way over to Wayne and Randolph and Union County on the east side of the state.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Kind of along I-70. So I am a former teacher. I'm a scientist and a small business person, and a true small business person where, we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. We employ under 10 people. And so I think given those kinds of experiences that I've had in the classroom and in running a small business, and understanding how science works, I decided to run for Congress.
And I understand this is not your first run for office. Is that right?
Right. So I ran in 2022 against Greg Pence in this for this same seat right after they redistricted the whole congressional the state for the congressional races. So I this is my second time running in this new district. And before that, I kind of got my feet wet when we had some empty ballot spots in 2020 during the pandemic. So I ran for state senate in southern Indiana, which was Bartholomew County was the farthest east, and then Jackson, and then all the way down to Bedford in Lawrence County.
Okay. Yeah. So, I want to say I appreciate you going out there and, first of all, you had an empty ballot, back in 20, got to fill those in, run everywhere, right? That's super important. And, 22, things didn't work out. It's a gerrymandered district, still a gerrymandered district. And I know you're running an uphill race, and that not everybody's up for that, but it's a super important job. And I want to thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. I mean, it is not an easy place to run, but, and I'll put this in there. Indiana is not as red as everyone believes it is. When we keep in mind that in 2008, we were the swing state where everyone was coming to visit, and it's all the same people still living here. When we look at the people who have moved out, Indiana really hasn't moved. So we're all the same people. What we are is, and I think Destiny Wells says it the best, we're a purple state with a turnout problem.
Yeah.
So I think when we turn out to vote, we can change things.
Absolutely. So you said you were a teacher for a while. What level did you teach?
So after the flood in 2008, we needed science teachers in Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation, and I just happened to ask the right person, how do I do this? And my husband and I had closed our business after our flood. So I was looking for something to do, and it was a good fit. So I taught high school science from the spring of 2009. I started in teaching Spanish because I was also licensed in foreign language. Went back and got a teaching license. So I am a licensed teacher. So I do have a teaching license in foreign language and in science. So then after that, I taught environmental science and biology at the high school level at our public school here, which is a magnet school called CSA UTech.
What's your area of science? Because it sounds like you were doing science stuff. That's the scientific term for it, right?
It is.
But no, what were you specializing in before you got into that?
So my undergraduate is in biology, and what I like is ecology and looking at systems and whole systems and how everything interacts together. And there's a greater application of that in the entire world. Whatever you're looking at, there is an application of that systemic look of things and how things are interrelated.
That's super important. Just to be able to look at things in the grand scheme and how all the different pieces fit together, and especially somebody going into Congress, I think that would suit you very well to big systems thinking, because boy, they don't do a lot of it there, and could probably use your input, but also leaders in Washington should really be able to think that way.
Right. So I had a little venture into politics. I had never really been political before. We had a small business, so I always tried to kind of stay out of it. And in Indiana, we're pretty moderate here. I mean, there's nothing really radical about, most of us here, we care about people. And I'm still the same way. I care about people. But I had the opportunity to do a fellowship on Capitol Hill through the Department of Energy and their Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship Program. So it takes teachers out of the classroom for a year, and it puts them into either the policy arena or the letter agency arena, like NASA, National Science Foundation. And there's a variety. They keep branching out into more areas now. So I was selected. The original intention was for teachers to learn policy on Capitol Hill. And so 5 of the 14 of us were selected to go to Capitol Hill when I was selected. And it was something I had never heard about. And somebody mentioned it to me, and I applied kind of last minute, honestly. One of those things where I was like, well, this sounds like it would be interesting and I could learn a lot. So I was selected, and my first reaction was, do I have to go to Capitol Hill? Can I go to NASA or National Science Foundation? Or, like I know that world. And they said, you're either going to Capitol Hill or you stay home. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And at that point, they knew more about me than I knew about me, because when I got there, I fell absolutely in love with policy and the way that we can shape policy to fix things that need fixed in everyday people's lives.
And was that a real two-way street? Were they having you there to see how they make education policy, or were they getting your input on how to, write education policy?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So we were there in both capacities. At one point, all of us felt the 14 fellows were sitting in the Department of Education director's office with their assistants, and we had a big meeting to talk about teacher preparation. So we were there in several capacities, but I wasn't there just for the education part. I was also there for the science part. And I ended up writing one bill I was in 2 offices, because I selected one office that the congressperson was elected governor of their state. So then I had to find a new office. So in the first office, I wrote a bill that became law in December of 2020. And it was an original bill. So when I did that, and that's when I said I fell in love with writing policy, because I thought it was this big, mysterious, complicated, and it is complicated, but it is
a lot of legalese.
Right. There are professionals who do that part for you. So if you're a creative problem solver, which is what science is, there's a place, and I really appreciated what that was for. My second office, I was in the first female chairwoman of the Office of Science, Space, and Technology, and that's where I got my science fix. I got to be involved in all of those things that I said I wanted to do with NASA, National Science Foundation. I had a sneak peek at the Green New Deal before it was unveiled. All those kinds of things. Met amazing, brilliant people who advise our country at many different levels. So
these are the nonpartisan career civil servants, bureaucrats that Trump, and through Project 2025, wants to throw all those people out, replace them with God knows who, as long as they lick the boot, right?
Yes. And when I say that they are brilliant, the people that are doing this work could make way more money than what they do where they're at. But they do it because, they love our country. They know that our country needs experts in their fields. And they're really good at what they do. They're able to help Congress people make decisions, give them the information that they need to make decisions. And that, especially in today's world, is worth its weight in gold.
And it's so, and let me get this straight. You've already written legislation, right? Right. That jump around a little bit, because we're going to talk about this at the end, but Pence the Lesser retired, right? So there's not an incumbent in your race.
Right.
So you are the only person in your race who's actually already written legislation.
At the federal level, right? Yes.
All right. Well, hey, look at that. So experience writing legislation, and you've not even, been elected yet. That's fantastic. So let's jump into policy a little bit. So obviously, in any election, the primary concern of voters is the economy. Now, your opponent, Mr. Shreve, is a very wealthy businessman. So I'm assuming his pitch is going to be like, look how successful I am. I know business. I know economy, right? Why is that? Like, why do these things not translate? You know?
Well, I think most Hoosiers know what it's like to have more month at the end of their money.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of those Hoosiers. I mean, I lived on a teacher's salary. My husband and I and two kids lived on a beginning teacher salary in 2011. If you go back and look what its beginning teacher salary was in 2011, it was well below the poverty level.
Yep.
So we know what that's like. We've lived that. We've been through job loss. We've been through cuts. We've been through downsizing. We know what that road looks like. We know what it's like saying, we got to buy groceries. How are we going to do this? And then as small business people, and when I say true small business people, we know what it's like to sacrifice our own paycheck to pay employees. So a lot of small business people out there know what that's like. You make a lot of sacrifices when you're a true small business that, bigger businesses don't really have to worry about. So when I say small business, I mean small business like your local Main Street business. I think Hoosiers worry about, their mortgage payment and their rent payment, because I have students who graduated in the first graduating class that I taught and subsequent ones after that. But they graduated in 2012. And even a couple years ago, they were still living 3 and 4 young people to a 2-bedroom apartment because the rents were going up. Now the rents have almost doubled since then. Most of them are still working 2 and 3 jobs. And that's with going to college. Some of them have had, some of them have parents and another family that are able to help them. Some of them have lucked out on different things, but overall, they're all struggling. My kids graduated in 2013 and 2018. They're struggling to, pay rent, save enough money to buy a house, all of that stuff. So I think I understand how Hoosiers struggle and what it's going to take to help overcome those struggles, and what those pieces are that can make life easier so people get some breathing room and can have a life where they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs.
Yeah, right. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's the American dream. You're right, that you can work one job and
Yeah.
and afford a house and a car and to have a family. And so you get the economy on a micro level, like you understand how those decisions affect people in their regular day-to-day lives. I mean, do you think Shreve knows how much a gallon of milk costs? I don't think he does his own shopping.
I know that when he cashed out of his very large business, that puts him among the top 4,500 people in income in the nation.
Yeah.
That's not the world I live in. That's not the world that 99.9% of Hoosiers live in. It's a very slim margin of people that can live with that kind of a cushion.
And fundamentally, in the end, I think it comes down to he might be very successful in business, very good at it. I understand he's a very personable guy, runs his business like a champ, or at least he did when he was still doing it. But running a government and running a business are not the same thing. You're not running a government to make money. There is not a profit motive. You are running it to serve people.
Exactly. And I think we saw that and still see this in our public schools, because we had in the 2000s, I was part of different committees and things in public schools that they brought in business executives to try to, make the schools more efficient or whatever, and make them run like businesses. And again, That's not the function of a school. That's not the function of our government to make a profit. It's to serve people, and to use those resources wisely so that the maximum number of people can be served.
So, still on the economy here, the Republicans are attempting to hammer Kamala Harris, vis-a-vis Joe Biden and, Democrats in general, on the economy because they say it was so much better under Trump before the pandemic, and Democrats will respond, well, the economic numbers right now look great. What's the disconnect?
Well, I think when we look at corporate profits, I mean, they are at an all-time high, but that doesn't really translate to a benefit to most people and most Hoosiers. The stock market may be high and big investors may be doing well, but the reality is in Indiana, most of us aren't that affected by it. We have 401ks. If we're fortunate enough, some of us have 401ks. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are entirely reliant on Social Security and Medicare when they
Yeah.
retire. So I think when we look at those kinds of issues, we really have to look at them as, where are most people, not where are the most profitable people or where are the people in charge of everything. Where are most people actually living day to day? I know a lot of small businesses are struggling and, trying to expand, trying to make a go of it. And sometimes that is a second job because, somebody's got a dream, they want to have a business and
Yeah.
they've got to work one job to be able to get their dream off the ground. And
Yeah.
um and that's the way. I mean, that's the greatest thing that we have. One of the biggest pieces of things that have come out of the new Harris campaign is this small business grants. And I'm so excited about that because in our area in Indiana, we are an innovation center in central Indiana, and we always have been. And so that will help so many small businesses and people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. It helps across the board get businesses started and keep them going. And I think there's more policies out there like that that can come about with a change in administration. And I mean, Harris will definitely need people in Congress like me who have the capacity to understand that it's not just about the big businesses, but also about the small businesses.
Yeah, big business, I think, has done a really good job over the last, say, 50 years of convincing small business that they're all on the same side. Hey, man, we're business buddies, right? But in the end, like the big businesses will inevitably, without regulation, eat those small businesses.
Right. Well, we see it today. Um, we do see that, and um, there have been a lot of attempts to sort of mitigate that, and but right now we do have unchecked corporate greed, and
hmm
it is hurting middle class America.
So, is a solution to this?
Part of it is a living wage. We've got to have living wages, across the U.S. And a living wage means that food is able to be purchased without sacrificing something else. A living wage is, you know, people don't have to run to the second or third job because they can't keep the lights on or pay the mortgage without it. It means that there's time for a family and time for relaxation. And I know that sounds kind of trite that everybody's like, oh, well, no, you just got to work harder. But when you don't have a chance to relax and you're in that stressful situation the whole time, it takes a toll on your life and your family.
hmm
And when you're a teacher, you see what that does to kids. And that's what I was seeing happening to kids in my classroom by the time they got to high school. In addition to all the other things they have to deal with in social media, that one piece there with parents not able to relax is huge.
Yeah, if you're constantly running the grind, when do you have time to spend quality time with your children?
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah.
Another area, and this is all, I mean, it's all economic, right? It all takes up chunks of your family budget, is healthcare. And in 2019, at the early part of the 2020 campaign, when now Vice President Harris was in the early stages of that primary, a champion of Medicare for all. Now, since she has taken the nomination over in this cycle, she's kind of hedged on that and says, well, maybe that's not the best way to get more health care for everybody. What do you think is the best way to fix American health care?
I do think that Medicare for all would solve a number of issues, especially with unbundling healthcare from our employment.
Mm-hmm.
When healthcare and employment are bundled together and you lose your job, then you lose your healthcare, which may mean that you or a family member is at risk of losing your life because it changes a lot of things and it changes them quickly. You may not be able to see the same doctors you were seeing before and get that continuity of care. And we know that continuity of care is hugely important with people facing chronic disease, chronic pain, injuries, all kinds of issues. And when that's tied to your job, people are more likely to stay in a job that doesn't serve them well, where they're exploited to the point that it takes a toll on their lives because they're trying to keep health care. And I think in today's world, we can do better than that. And maybe Medicare for all is not the solution. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a hybrid program of something. I know the Affordable Care Act has expanded some things in the last couple of years, and they've lowered some premiums. They've lowered some prescription prices. But again, we're stuck with that piece where not every doctor's covered. If you lose a job and you're on the healthcare marketplace, it's difficult to navigate. It's difficult to figure out if you're covered, when you're covered, where you're covered. And I think simplifying that would do everyone a greater service.
When Republicans attack Medicare for all, or even people in the middle of our party and think, that's too far, that's too much. The complaint is that that's government coming in between you and your health care, right? But the insurance company is already between you and your health care, is it not?
Right. Exactly. So, and we're seeing even, farmers and people in the rural areas and small business people have had to band together, and even churches now have banded together to provide healthcare solutions for their members because if they're not able to get quality care through their employer, or they need to leave their employer, it can be difficult. I just learned of the churches banding together to do this earlier this year, I think in February or March.
I'd not heard of this.
So, that tells us, when we've got, people banding together to try to do this better, we can do better as a government. And like I said, maybe it's not Medicare for all, but certainly GoFundMe is not a solution to high healthcare bills. And losing your house and your savings and any quality of life that you've built is not an answer to the fact that you get sick, because people get sick, and that's the reality.
Yeah. So we were talking about government getting in between you and your doctor. Well, the small government Republican Party decided that government should be in between women and their reproductive health care provider. So that's my way of, I guess, segueing to talking about abortion in this country. And that is a word Democrats had not wanted to say, I think, for a lot of years, and talk about necessary health care and call it what it is. How are women in this country, especially in captured red states like Indiana, how are we going to get women's freedoms back?
We need a national bill that I will support. I'd like to see it codified into permanent statute to safeguard women's health care and their right to abortion and any other procedure, and anyone to, have the right to any procedure for their own body. And it left between the person and their, and if they choose their doctor or healthcare provider. We have HIPAA laws for a reason. And all of this legislation that is banning abortion, banning any kind of maternal fetal health care, that it puts women at risk of needlessly dying. And these procedures, and they are medical procedures, have been around for generations and saved countless women's lives. If men had to have miscarriages, this wouldn't be happening. And I'll say that again. If men had miscarriages, this wouldn't be happening. If men had to go through pregnancy. So the reason for having an abortion should never matter, because it's no one's business but the person who's pregnant. And I mean, there's just no other way to put it. I had 2 miscarriages between my 2 children. It's horrible, but it is a part of pregnancy that happens. And I've talked to very few women that have never experienced that, actually. And some of them are horrific and some of them are very easy. And I don't think anybody really knows, what makes the difference. You can't really predict when it's going to happen or what's going to happen. But the place that we've put women, the position we've put women in, by instituting these draconian bans, is just unthinkable and horrific.
Yeah, I can't believe we've gone backward.
Yeah.
Like this. It blows my mind that my wife and my daughter have less rights over their own bodies than my mother and grandmother did.
Yeah.
That's not the way these things are supposed to work.
Indiana signed that law on my 53rd birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
It was great. So, yeah, I had more rights as a 5-year-old than I did as a 53-year-old.
Jeez. So that's an incredibly important issue, and probably the issue for a lot of people in this election, and rightfully so, I think. Now, another issue that gets a ton of play, and I feel like Republicans have been running on the same thing for at least 30 years now, is immigration. Oh, there's an invasion on the border. Like, what's really going on? Are people in your neck of the woods in Indiana, are your lives being negatively affected by illegal immigration?
Well, I mean, the thing is, in May of 2024, there was a federal bipartisan bill to strengthen border security and give the Department of Homeland Security the resources it needed to solve the border crisis, I guess they call it. It was stopped by a handful of federal politicians, directed by someone running for president.
No, we can say it's
no real reasonable no rational reason why that it needed to stop, other than he just wanted it stopped. And in Indiana, our border is over 1,000 miles away.
Hmm.
What's always put out there is that, oh, it's the source of fentanyl and other drugs crossing, but actually it is not. When you look at the data, it is not the major source of where fentanyl and other illegal drugs are crossing the border. Um, that's that's just something to inflame, fan the flames of fear, and I think that's wrong to do, especially in a campaign. 86% of American voters believe we need a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those people who are brought to the U.S. as young children, and the U.S. has always been their home. And I agree with that. We do, and I'll work to help with that. We do need to strengthen and modernize the asylum process. And then update training for our U.S. Border Patrol and Customs agents. We have a lot of loopholes, and I think those loopholes can be closed. And I think this federal bill, which, if it's passed, will take care of a lot of that. Um, there have been some increased involvement of our local law enforcement with federal immigration officers, and I think
Hmm.
that really, I think, serves to undermine what our local law enforcement does and the relationships they build with people. Because again, it stokes that fear. There's no trust there. That trust dissolves and erodes, and it doesn't serve any of us well. So, to me, that immigration issue, yes, we need to address it. We have plans. We have good ways. We have things that people agreed on in a bipartisan way, and I think that's the best way to agree on things, because when we only have one side represented, then we tend to go really extreme one way or the other. And then no one's really happy except for a very, very few. But I do think we have checks and balances in our government. And I think, a representative democracy is part of that checks and balances. And when we have supermajorities, or we have people who have held seats for a long period of time with one point of view, the other point of view is never represented.
So we talk about the border crisis. Like, what's the problem down there? Is it a processing thing? Like, hey, there's a lot of people that want to come here and go through the legal processes and work and come here and live peacefully and take care of their families and pay their taxes and contribute to society. What do we do about that? Because I think in the end, it's like Republicans and a lot of conservatives just don't want brown people to come into the country. Like that's what they're saying. But really, I mean, so we do have a crisis of a huge backlog, right? There's people want to get in.
Right.
What should we do about that?
I think that bipartisan bill would solve a lot of those things. It would put processes in place. It would strengthen those processes and those regulations that are in place. I think there is money to build facilities. There's money for more people to help handle the backlog of cases. I know the legal system and the legal cases was another piece where there were backlogs. And I think, all of that does take time, and it takes manpower, and it takes resources. So it is going to cost money. And just building a wall is not going to solve the problem. Um, so I read something the other day. I can't remember where it was, but it said that it was talking about New York City and how the Dutch in the 1600s built this giant wall to keep whatever undesirable out. And then the English attacked from the sea, and that wall was torn down, and it became Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've known for a long time that walls don't work. Um, you've got to be more. I mean, there's got to be a process. There's got to be, and like I said, this bill was hammered out, and when you're in that give and take on Capitol Hill, there's a lot of late nights. There's a lot of staffers working on it. There's a lot of really brilliant people working to put these solutions out there that are workable and winnable and doable, and affordable. And that was just thrown out. So I think when we can elect people who will respect that process and not give in to just pure partisan politicking for the sake of fanning flames of fear and whatever else. That's what we really need. We need people who are serious about this job and not just playing at it.
Yeah, actually argue in good faith, come there to do what they're going to. So what else are you hearing about as you're out there? I'm sure you're knocking doors and making lots of phone calls at this point. What are people telling you are their concerns besides what we've already talked
Um, we're hearing that Social Security and Medicare is the second most important issue to people who are reaching out to us and people that we're encountering on the street. I had somebody come to a little get together we had in the street in front of my house in Columbus last weekend, and he has voted for the Republicans his whole entire life. And he says, I wanted to hear what you had to say. And we talked a lot about Social Security and Medicare because, again, Project 2025 has it on the chopping block. And when people are finding out about that, and what we're finding is the Democrats all know about it, understand it, know what's coming down the pike. A lot of Republicans don't know, especially older Republicans don't know. And so we've been reaching out to older people who are both Republican and Democrats who may not be on social media, may not be looking at, various sources of news, may only have one source of news, to let them know that, we're serious about making sure that Social Security and Medicare stay in place, stay protected, and function as they were intended to when they were put into our system. And that's where people pay into them, and then people can get it back out. And there is no one making a profit off of your Social Security and Medicare. And it's not being borrowed against for this and that and whatever else might have happened.
Oh, right. And the argument is always, oh, Social Security is going broke. It's good. No, it's not going broke. But also, it would be super easy to even raise benefits if all we did was tax the wealthy the same rate as everybody else on Social Security tax.
Right. Yep.
Because it's a remarkably low amount over which you do not pay into Social Security anymore. Is that right? You know what that number is?
I think right now it's like, income tax limits are like $13,000, and I think it's right in there somewhere.
But I know, as far as like paying into Social Security, if you make over, and I think it's only like $160,000 after that point, you don't pay any more Social Security tax.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. It's something in there. I need to look that up again, but the thing is that there's 65 million people right now across the U.S. completely dependent on Social Security and Medicare. So if those two things go away, if you're completely dependent on it, it means if it goes away, you don't have anything else. So you can't pay your rent, you can't buy your medicine, you can't do anything. And I had a lady last night say that she called her son and she said, you better stop voting Republican or you're going to be feeding me, clothing me, and buying my medicine for the next 20 years. I thought it was really kind of funny, but it's actually, the truth, because people will have nowhere to go. And people have paid into this over their whole working lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is really important to make sure that we elect people who do want to protect this, not privatize it, not farm it out for financial people to make profits on, and take a cut of this and a cut of that and line their own pockets with it, because it's essentially the money that we've paid in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other big concerns that you are hearing from the people out there?
I think the wages, living wages and rent. So that's kind of they're kind of bound together.
Yeah.
Living wages, we've lost those, and those have eroded over the past 30 years. So when we have union representation, and strong unions, we make sure that's there, and that's how we keep our middle class strong. And the other part of that is housing. We don't have enough housing units to fill the need. My husband and I were at the Home Builders show in Las Vegas in February, and I think we're 3.5 million units short right now, like right this very minute, and it's growing. So, as we keep adding months to the year and years, then those numbers are growing. So without without incentives for, people to build quality affordable housing, not some things that are just going to last, 20 years and then need to be torn down and rebuilt, but quality affordable housing is a real need. And I think, again, that's not just younger people. When you talk to people who are getting ready to leave the homes that they raise their families in, and they want to go to their last home or their ending home instead of a starter home, there's really nowhere for them to go. So there's just very few options available for people. And I think, we need more starter homes. We need more homes for people to, move out of the homes they've raised their families in, and, be able to downsize a little bit, or, rearrange how they're living. And it is important to people. And we've lost that ability in the last 10 years or more.
There's also a lot of housing stock out there that is held in like private hands, like, hedge funds and big rental companies, come and they'll scoop up whole neighborhoods. It's not as bad here in Indiana, but there's places in the country where, a house comes up on the market and it gets swooped up on. Somebody pays cash, and they turn it into a rental.
Right. Yeah, and that's an issue. Like you said, it's an issue across the whole nation. I think that we need to look seriously at how we view housing, and, single family homes were never designed to be instruments of investment. They're designed to be housing. When you go to apartments or, different rental pieces that are designed to be rental, I think that's a different, a whole different model. But single family homes, I think people are very frustrated in not being able to afford that because of what's been happening, and them being rented out, and then not being able to afford the rent. So my oldest is in Oklahoma, and they had a house they were renting. They're both teachers, and the house was sold out from under them. They had to find a new house, right? And so now it's being rented for like twice what they were paying. Same.
And yeah, you don't have a chance to build it. Equity, build wealth, and all of that equity and that wealth that regular people could be accruing in a home they own is going to some Wall Street douche.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, single family homes were never designed to be an instrument of investment. They are housing, and they are, it's part of our American dream. And I think we need to bring that back. And I'm not against investments, and I'm not against, people owning rental properties and things. But I think, like you said, when somebody's buying up whole neighborhoods with cash and people aren't able to afford to live there anymore, something's broken.
Yeah, absolutely. So zooming back out a little bit away from the, go deep into the weeds, as you're out and about, what is the mood? What's the vibe? Are people excited? Are the kids excited? The younger voters?
Younger voters I've talked to are very excited. They are very excited to cast their first vote for Kamala Harris in Indiana. A lot of the young women I'm talking to are excited that they have all women at the top of the ticket. And actually, a lot of women who are over 60 are extremely excited by seeing all women at the top of our ticket. Um, and depending on what congressional district you are, that'll go all the way to the congressional district. So
Yeah, we've got a good crop of women running for Congress across the state too, and some good guys. And I don't want to
yep.
throw them under the rug. Yeah. So obviously, fundraising is how this whole machine is run, and unfortunately, that's the way it is. Your opponent is independently wealthy. So how are you working to overcome the monetary advantages that Shreve has?
So whether he has 590 million or 8 million, which I think my last opponent had, I mean, to us, there's no real difference between that, because to our campaign, it's about people and it's about reaching people. I was a small business person, not a large business, and a teacher, which means that I have had to operate my entire life on very little and limited funds and be able to do the job that I need to do within those constraints. And the job can't suffer because of lack of funding. It just means you get creative and you go to what is truly important, and that is people. And so I am every day in our 11 counties, talking to people. Like you said, we're knocking on doors. We have teams of people in different counties knocking on doors. We have volunteers making phone calls to people who, might not be comfortable answering their door. Because that can be, it can be you don't always know if you've got a stranger coming to your door, and not everybody wants to answer their door. So we respect that. We have different ways that we are reaching out to people, and, we're holding events where people can come and talk to me. We're encouraging people to talk to their friends and neighbors and have those conversations about what's important to them. Why is it important to them, and which ones of the candidates would actually help make that happen for them. And those are the real conversations that we want people to have, and we're encouraging them to. Those don't take money. Those just take people who are really committed to making change in our country, and that, we want to see things in Indiana change, and we want to see women's rights put back, and we want to see Social Security and Medicare protected, and we want to see education protected, public education, and those kinds of things. So the other thing is, Hoosiers don't like to be bought. Hoosiers work too hard for our money. Somebody's got that much money. I grew up, we were always a little suspicious of them. What would they do for that?
As one should be, I think. And I don't want to begrudge the,
Right.
the wealthy to an extent, but after a certain point, all right, man, you got enough.
So whoever we're going to go up against will always be able to outspend us. But our message is real and authentic and true. I'm a real person. I'm not in a classroom right now. I could be just back in my classroom, teaching and doing all of that. I'm actually finishing my doctorate in education, so I'm not in the classroom at the moment, but I'll be back in one soon, till I win, and then I'll be on Capitol Hill.
There you go.
Because this matters. This matters to me and all of the people associated with our campaign. This matters to them. And I think that's what we have, something that my opponent doesn't. Neither of my opponents do. And it is an uphill battle, but we know that Hoosiers want better. And they want somebody who will actually represent them and do the job that they were elected to do, and not just sit back and watch the least effective Congress that ever happened in the United States, which is what the last Congress was, or this current Congress is the least effective Congress we've had. And the current incumbent agreed with that. So why are we paying him?
Yeah, right.
Put me in there, I'll do the work.
So we are we're getting on here toward the end, but the ineffective Congress, and that's a kind of a thing you get when you've got split leadership in Washington, right? And that's why, as excited as people are, I think, about Kamala Harris, and the polls, except for this one outlier we saw recently, are all looking pretty good for her. But she can't go in there and snap her fingers and get stuff done. She needs a Democratic Congress as well.
Right. So she needs a Democratic House and Senate to be able to get a lot of these things done. And we know that when we have Democratic House, Congress, and President, our country takes a turn for the better overall, and always has. The deficit shrinks, people's quality of life goes up, and people may not want to admit it if they're Republicans, but when you look at the data, that's actually what it shows. You asked about one thing that I didn't cover, and that's guns. And we've seen 2 school shootings in the last 8 days. And this really has to stop, and we know how to stop it. I am not an advocate for taking anybody's gun away, but I do think that weapons of war belong with soldiers and not on our streets, and they belong with people who are trained to handle them. They belong locked up in places. I mean, even the military locks up guns when they're not being used. So I think when we take some common sense approaches to that, we really need to double down on that. And I'm a teacher, so I've shepherded those kids to those run, fight, hide places. And there is nothing worse than the feeling in your stomach, even when you know it's a drill, than having to go through that. And the fact that our kids go through that from kindergarten on is just unfathomable. And a lot of parents don't understand what we've had to teach kids. We teach kids that if a shooter comes in, everything's a weapon. Everything. Your laptop, your chair, if you can pick a table up, a table, a fire extinguisher, a flagpole. This is what we've had to teach kids in classrooms outside of what we should be teaching them in science and math and English and foreign language and art. We can stop this, and we know how to do it. And I think that is critical that we move forward to those. And most everyone agrees that we do need expanded background checks, even gun owners. I grew up in Indiana shooting guns. I went through NRA training as a kid in the 70s. It was safety training. So I think people know what's right, and people who are yelling about losing their freedom, they're not going to lose any freedom. But kids might be alive.
Right. Yeah, we're sacrificing our children for like a handful of white dudes to go cosplay Rambo in the woods with their buddies.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't want to end on a down note, Cindy, but let's.
People are excited. I can tell you, I got a chance to go to the Democrat National Committee. I was there to work on caucus meetings, which is like those, the environmental and the rural caucus and the women's caucus, small business caucus, those kinds of things. And a colleague from when I was a fellow saw me and said, "You don't have credentials for the convention?" I said, "No." And he says, "Here, go." So for one night, I get to be Cinderella at the ball. And I was there the first night, which was just incredible. And that excitement that we saw in Chicago wasn't just with the people at the convention. It was the police officers. It was other visitors. It was people walking down the lake shore when I parked to wait out the traffic to go home. It was because somebody saw the "I Love Joe" sign in my car and stopped to talk. It was everywhere. And when I'm out, even all the way in the rural counties in Randolph County and Union County and Wayne County, Henry County, it's there too. We've got record attendance at our Democrat county meetings. It's so exciting.
That's good to see. That's the engagement at the local level, I think, is the best part, especially because, if you multiply that by, I'm sure it's not just southeastern Indiana, it's probably all over the country that there's a lot of that excitement too, and that's good stuff. So, take us home here, Cindy. Give us the closing pitch. What's your message for the people in Indiana's 6th district, and anybody who's listening? Hey, we can take the help wherever we can get it from, right?
Well, I grew up a United Methodist in Southern Indiana, like a lot of people did in the 70s and 80s. And one of the things, besides instilling that absolutely solid sense of community and everyone helping to take care of everyone else, the thing that stuck with me was do all the good you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you can, which is just a way of saying be a plain old good human. And that's why I'm running, because we need more good humans looking out for all of us for the right reasons. And that's the only reason I'm running. I mean, that's literally it.
How can the good humans listening help out your campaign?
They can go to our website, which is www.wirth4congress.com. And
Very
you can
good.
find it. You can sign up to volunteer. You can donate. You can leave us a message that says, we support you. You order a T-shirt, all kinds of things.
Fantastic. Well, I will link there in the show notes for everybody, and go help Cindy out. Cinde Wirth, thank you so much for joining the Who's Left podcast.
Well, thank you. And thank you for what you do for Indiana and democracy, because we need more voices like yours out there.
I appreciate that. Once again, that was Cinde Wirth, Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in Indiana's 6th district, located in the central and eastern parts of the state, including Columbus, Richmond, some of Cincinnati's Indiana suburbs, most of Indianapolis's south suburbs, and the southern tip of Indianapolis itself. What seems like a lifetime ago, way back in only the 2nd episode of this podcast, I spoke with Purdue biology professor and West Lafayette City Councilman Dr. David Sanders. He said something that sticks with me to this day. Since the far-right Reagan faction took over the GOP in the late 1970s, and increasingly since then, Republicans have governed by anecdote. Not by data, but by cherry-picked individual data points. They latch onto an outlier case that matches their confirmation bias, craft a narrative around it, usually one that elicits fear or anger, and repeat it again and again and again, until a large subset of the public believes that the exception is, in fact, the rule. From one lifelong con artist welfare queen driving a Cadillac in 1974 to a rumor about a missing cat in Springfield, Ohio 50 years later, the right have used salacious stories, non-representative data points, to mislead and distract, while plutocrats like Jefferson Shreve run off with all the money. It is ironic that the left are decried as bleeding heart liberals, guided by emotion, while conservatives are considered rational and businesslike. In fact, the opposite is quite true. Republicans are afraid of everything and need ancient superstitions and authoritarian strongmen to protect them. Sean Hannity was on Fox News the other night talking about a study showing that, in conservatives, some part of their brains are bigger than those of liberals. Not the one you think it is, champ, because the part in question, the amygdala, is responsible for perceiving threat. They are literally hardwired for fear. Liberal democracy, on the other hand, when it works correctly, when it isn't sabotaged by power, panic, and paranoia, is like the scientific method, in that ideas are brought forward, tested, and debated transparently. You see what works, what doesn't, you make adjustments, and you keep trying to improve. Congress is full of smooth-brained dum-dums like Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, James Comer, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Mark Wayne Mullen. They're good at poking one's amygdala, but not good at governing. That's why we need more people like Cinde Wirth in halls of power. Educators, scholars, scientists, people who know that feedback loops aren't a breakfast cereal. In an article by Michael Goodman, an internationally recognized leader in organizational learning, he says, quote, "Systems thinking often involves moving from observing events or data to identifying patterns of behavior over time, to surfacing the underlying structures that drive those events and patterns." End quote. The federal government, geopolitics, migration, the climate, the economy, the healthcare, education, and prison regimes. These are all incredibly complex and intertwined systems that have evolved over hundreds, thousands, even billions of years. Like a butterfly flapping its wings in the distant past, or a single pea under 20 mattresses, changing one variable anywhere can have ripple effects in unexpected places. I want people with science in their minds and compassion in their hearts representing the people in Washington, thinking about these things, surfacing the underlying structures. Now, I'm not saying Jefferson Shreve isn't an intelligent individual. Unlike Boebert, Comer, and MTG, I am calling them dumb. Quite the contrary. Success as an entrepreneur requires a distinct kind of intelligence. But in the end, only one number matters. One data point. Profit. And Shreve is smart enough to know damn well that surfacing the underlying structures of this country's problems, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and addressing them, threatens his bottom line. What I am saying is that Cinde Wirth is an entrepreneur and educator and scientist and exactly the kind of person we need more of in Congress. Thank you for listening. Thanks again to Cinde for a great conversation. Find more about her campaign at wirthforcongress.com. That's WIRTH, the number 4, Congress.com. Please help out in whatever way you can. Volunteer. Donate. I'll link her Act Blue in the show notes. After visiting there, head on over to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and help support this project with a paid subscription. That's where you'll find everything I publish. You can also find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft, and on most other social media sites at ScottRog78. My DMs are open for feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. You can also email me at scottrog78@gmail.com. Forward the show to a friend and have them forward it to another friend. Let's keep building this project and a more democratic Indiana. Until next time, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.